They fly.
Good evening, everybody. If there are any chairs available, if everybody wants to grab one, some there, we're going to get things going here quick before the fire marshal stops by and sees what's going on here. But no, thanks everybody for coming out and visiting tonight with at our district advisory board meeting. Just for introduction purposes, I'm Jeb Williams, director with the Game and Fish Department. I want to introduce our new advisory board member here for District 7, Jody Summer. Last meeting, I believe we recognized Dave Naring, who was a district advisory board member for 8 total years, and so now Jody's on board, and appreciate it a lot. Appreciate everybody's willingness to come out and chat tonight. We've been, of course, all over the state for the last couple of weeks or so, and various meetings, and all of them have gone pretty darn good so far, like normal. That's one of the things with advisory board meetings. We get to hear a lot in various parts of the state. Sometimes 2 consecutive nights we hear total opposite things. Too many mule deer, not enough mule deer. Didn't see any hunting pressure, saw lots of hunting pressure, those types of things. But it gives us good opportunity and good perspective on on what's going on out there. So really appreciate people coming out and for the visit tonight. First of all, I want to make sure to get our Scott introduced here, and so Scott, go ahead and if you want to introduce yourself. Please.
Sure. Scott Peterson, Deputy Director.
I'm Phil Hodge, Assistant Chief for Wildlife Division. Good evening, everybody. I'm Casey Anderson. I'm the Wildlife Division Chief out of Bismarck.
Good evening, Scott Winkleman, Chief Game Warden.
Hi all, Greg Link. I'm the Chief of Conservation Communication here in Bismarck.
Greg Power, Fisheries Chief.
Greg Freeman, Communications Supervisor.
Marty Eglin, Education Supervisor.
Paul Bailey, I'm a fisheries biologist in Bismarck.
Brent Weston, Wildlife Health Biologist at our health lab down the road.
Levi Jacobson, I'm the Wildlife Resource Supervisor here in Bismarck.
Jared Blem, Mandan, District Game Warden.
Corey Irk, I'm the District Game Warden for Bismarck at Burley County. Jeff Seeger, Warden Pilot out of Bismarck.
All right, I think that has us covered. Ashley's in the back, running everything, of course. That's a good reminder. Ashley is put together, her and Greg have put together this on live stream. So just for people's awareness, this is being live streamed, and that's something we've done here at the Bismarck meeting for the last couple of years now to give the public an opportunity to view if they can't make it to a meeting. Obviously there are a lot of familiar faces in here, and most people know about advisory board meetings, how they go, the local discussion that we have, but we also like to have a consistent agenda as far as items that we provide, that we want to talk about with the public and share with what's going on with the department. But some of the discussion, obviously at times, and that's the intent of advisory board meetings, when we're going to a different location, is to open up that first hour and talk about what's going on locally in those areas. And so that's where advisory board meetings probably differ a little bit. It's just some of the local feedback in various parts of the state that we're at. So that's what we're going to do tonight. Advisory board meetings, as many as you know, we try to keep in as informal as possible and just have a good discussion about what's going on from your perspective. And then also, like I said, we have some agenda items that we'd like to talk about and deliver some information to you of how we're utilizing and spending your sportsman's dollars. It's always a reminder I like to put out there, the Game and Fish Department is a special fund agency. We don't take any general tax funds. The money that we have to run the agency is by folks who buy hunting and fishing licenses, and then we're able to match those dollars with federal excise tax when you folks are buying hunting and fishing equipment. Those dollars get pooled to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and then distributed back to state agencies. So really unique funding model. It's a very successful funding model, and it's a user pay system that I think a lot of people are really proud of. And one of the things we probably don't talk enough about, and I think biologists are kind of guilty of this, economics, those different types of things probably aren't, a lot of times aren't priority, but It's a really important aspect of North Dakota, the economic impact that you folks in this room have to the state of North Dakota. And the return on investment is extremely high considering we don't take a nickel from the general tax fund. The dollars that are created and rolled over in North Dakota, are from the investment that you folks have with license fees and then the purchases that you make with fish and wildlife equipment. And so it's a really unique funding model that does a lot of states really well, and ours especially. And so it's a big business in North Dakota, and it's a very important aspect of the culture in North Dakota, obviously. So I'm going to turn it over to everybody in here to see what's on everybody's mind. And we've got a nice turnout of folks in here tonight, so really appreciate that. And obviously, like every meeting, there's going to be something on somebody's mind, and so I'll let the first person let it go. Yes, sir.
I'd like to bring up the CWD topic, because that seems like it's been a big focus this year. When it comes to CWD, the Game Fish claims that baiting spreads the disease, yet there's not one peer-reviewed document in the nation that baiting spreads the disease. And North Dakota's numbers don't warrant baiting restrictions, because out of 20 years of testing, 40,000 deer tested. As of November 1, 70 positive deer. 69 of those deer have been turned in by hunters. Those are healthy deer killed by a bullet or an arrow. And the Game and Fish has found one deer at Williston, but they found that deer dead. So there's 0 clinical deaths by CWD confirmed in the state of North Dakota, yet baiting has been in North Dakota forever. Why can't North Dakota be the state to focus on nutrition and actual deer herd versus restrictions on the hunters?
Well, let me just turn that over to Casey, I guess. I know that was something that we're going to be on our agenda, but I'll just turn that over to you, Casey, and we can start talking about it right now.
Yeah. So we did have our CWD plan that we updated back in the back. Hopefully you grabbed it. I mean, the plan wasn't necessarily to go through this plan in detail. But, you mentioned that we haven't had one deer die of the disease. We found the deer dead. Cause of death was CWD. And so, and luckily we haven't been finding deer dead, because of the disease. In most cases, our prevalency rates are really low, and that's the way we'd like to keep them. When we talk about baiting, the science behind how the disease spreads, okay? CWD spreads through saliva, urine, and feces from deer to deer. Okay? Those three ways have been proven. So what do you want to, how do you keep them from doing that at the most chances possible? You reduce time they spend together and congregation and the closeness they spend that time together. And so that's where the baiting thing comes in. And it's not that does baiting spread the disease? Anytime a deer picks up a prion, the chances of it getting it is there. Now the question is does baiting spread the disease exponentially faster or somewhat faster? Sometimes people get caught up in baiting doesn't stop the disease, or reducing baiting doesn't stop the disease. And honestly, at this point, we're probably not going to stop it altogether. What we don't want to do is we don't want to get the disease to the point where it starts controlling our deer population for us, like they've been showing in some of the other herds across the nation when the prevalency rate gets high, habitat's still in place and things like that, and those herds just can't come back. John?
I'm trying to find out, I called the Wyoming Game and Fish, I sent them an email. They said they would not respond to me over email. And I asked a simple question of how many deer have you found emaciated by CWD? And the units that you have that you're seeing a decline in deer population that are due to CWD and not predators, land encroachment, not 2011 snowstorm. Because what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, and I've listened to you guys, and my concern is that I'm bringing new hunters into the outdoors. I teach camp, and I've had in the last 3 years, 60, 70, 80, 99% of those kids, and whether you like it or not, are hunting over corn with their family. They're using bait to kill a deer bow hunting. They're learning how to bow hunt. Gives them a clean, ethical shot. the odds are, any hunter in here would know that if you put a little bit of corn down, the odds of killing a doe, a chance to shoot at a doe would be probably 100%. So right now in Wisconsin, they have 15% prevalence in CWD. They also have the highest deer population they have ever had in the whole entire time they've taken data. Colorado, same thing, is that their numbers have gone down, but I just read the article today where they stated that it's not, the elk population is going down, and it is not due to disease or to predation. They're not sure why their calf crop went from 60% down to 20%. And the same thing with the deer, they say that they're losing deer, but how much of that, you know, you can't tie the science to it. You can't tie the data to it. We're not seeing dead deer. A lot of us, I've lived deer 365 days with farmers and ranchers that watch them. In my lifetime, I've seen deer with epilepsy walking sideways. I've seen deer die from EHD. I've never seen an unhealthy deer from CWD walking. And you guys say a lot that they don't make it to the emaciated state, which I can understand that. But as ranchers and farmers and outdoorsmen, we could see those deer on the landscape. And what I'm worried about are we taking away opportunities from our toolbox to get kids into hunting, for the disabled hunters, for the veterans, for the elderly, whoever doesn't have the time that I may have to go out and put in food plots and do that thing, taking that opportunity away from them to have a chance to get into hunting. We're battling with computers, technology, all this stuff for these kids. And we know that if you go out and you put a little corn down, whether it's in a soybean field or out in the field, you're going to have animals come there. If we don't have the science to say that it's being spread, because on the one hand, we look at like the unit 3F2, there's been no baiting. My unit's been no baiting for 10 years, 12 years. It's still spreading. And these other states that have not had baiting for like 20, 30 years have a higher prevalence than we do. Maybe the baiting that people are doing is keeping these animals spread out in different areas. Like if you have 20 salt licks in 5 square miles versus one natural one, the one natural one is going to contain, going to have all the deer going to it. But if you have them spread out in the minerals, you know, maybe that's something that's working on our side. And what I just worry about is that if we don't have the science, we don't have the data to say that it spreads it faster. And also, bow hunters kill 7,000 deer a year. We killed 20% of the deer last year. So that's a way of controlling the population. Population control is the #1 way to control CWD, correct?
In some respects, yeah, you want to contain the population so that it's not getting to the point that it is out of food, water, space, shelter, and has, and you know, then therefore they need to disperse.
Because I'm not saying we don't have CWD. I know it's out there, but it seems sometimes we see it's like sky is falling, and it's been around since. You know, and again, I'm not a biologist, but I would say that it's been around for a long, long time. And the reason it's kind of like coronavirus, the more you test, the more you find. So the more we test, the more animals we're going to find. That doesn't mean that they're dying from it, you know, so, and I haven't seen that population. I'm talking to the guy tomorrow from the Wyoming to see if I can get an answer to show me the data that shows that actually deer herds are going down because of CWD and not from everything else.
Yeah, so some of the studies that I'm referring to that were done in Wyoming on not unit wide, like they're unit wide, but like specific herds of mule deer and whitetails, they did one on that move, you know, and are kind of a maintained herd within a unit. You know, when they did the studies, they found that, you know, the population was dropping. They're more likely to get predated, shot, die of other reasons, because of the way that CWD slowly affects their ability to thrive. I don't know how many people are familiar with what CWD does, but it's essentially a protein that when a deer ingests it, their body continually makes these proteins to replace cells, and it seems to attach to the nervous system, and so it makes these misfolded proteins called prions that actually start to create like cavities in their brains where they start to lose function because now they've got bad cells that don't work right. And I'm simplifying it. Brent could go into scientific words on this, but but they start to, maybe they lose their ability to avoid predators. Maybe the next one loses its, fear of vehicles or things like that. And so they just start to lose their ability to thrive. And over 18 to 24 months, they'll either die from something or die of the disease in the end because they just stop eating and everything else and they waste away. That's why it's called chronic wasting disease. But just a little.
Why isn't North Dakota doing something for nutrition? You guys are so focused on the AFWA document and testing hunter harvested deer. All that's doing to the hunters is restricting us hunters.
So what nutrition are you talking about?
I've sent it to you, Casey. I've sent it to Jeb. I've sent it to all 8 board members. There's research, current updated research out there other than the AFWA document.
That it stops the disease?
It stops the progression of the disease.
And how?
Why can't North Dakota be the state?
Again, I mean, obviously there's lots of different research out there, and again, some is peer reviewed, some is not. I don't know, the ones you're talking about are, I mean, if they are or not, those types of things, but everybody's going to pick and choose a little bit, on their research, right? And it's one of those things that it's really hard, for the Game and Fish Department when we are a data-driven, science-based organization, that when we know one of the ways that CWD can spread is through bodily fluids, is it responsible for us to promote a practice that congregates deer unnaturally for a longer period of time?
Excellent.
I'm asking you that. Is it responsible for us to do that?
Well, just so everybody knows here, it's a frequency dependent disease because the deer comes to the bait pile one time. They're not going to get the disease. They got to come in contact with the prion over and over and over.
And that's what some research shows, that highly contaminated areas there's a higher likelihood for that disease to spread. So that's essentially what we would be promoting. And again, we know that CWD is not exact. We know there's no silver bullet. It's a combination of things, whether it's the baiting restriction, whether it's the carcass movements, whether it's increased harvest that we put in place. And none of those 3 things are popular things, right? I mean, nobody likes those. We don't like those. We're deer hunters in North Dakota, right? So
it's hard for me to get worked up about this CWD aspect when you make a rule by fiat that limits hunter opportunity, like John said back here. There's a lot of gray hair in this room tonight, and our sport depends upon bringing youth forward. And regardless of whether or not I want to hunt over a bait pile, it's rather irrelevant. I think introducing kids to the sport and then saying, North Dakota, go sit in a tree. Well, there's a lot of areas where that's not feasible. And yet you want me to get worked up about this disease, and we can go to certain areas in our state where these deer are wintered up and they're congregated, and if somebody puts out a mineral pile or corn, or it feels like you're punishing sportsmen. You've had 70 positive cases in 20 years. It's hard for me to get on board with what you're telling me. You cannot do this because you're endangering the herd. And I look at Wisconsin and I look at Illinois and I look at other states and I think to myself, man, in my neck of the woods, I'm from Bismarck. I had to change my deer hunting unit this year because 80-90% of my deer last year died from EHD. Or just take car hits, 70 deer in 20 years. I'm sure we had 70 deer get hit by cars this month. I guess I'm offended by you're coming in by fiat and telling us you may not hunt this way because we're worried it could be the cause of the problem or it may increase the spread of this disease. I think that really this is a job for perhaps the people to speak, and that you can introduce a bill in the legislature or somebody can come in with a competing bill and say, we don't agree with this, but I'm thinking to the people who didn't have an opportunity to speak on this rather than you dictate it to us.
Yeah, and, and again, I'm sorry that you're offended, but again, I mean, our agency, I mean, that's our responsibility as an agency to manage the fish and wildlife populations of the state.
We'll support you to the hilt. We believe in what you're doing. But the data, I don't see the science here. I don't see.
I have talked to hundreds of people across the state of North Dakota, and not one person said that they're anti-research. They're anti-restriction.
Yes, sir, John.
First. I know we're not in Missouri, but
I guess the question I have is, chronic wasting isn't terrible in North Dakota, but it is in a lot of other places. A lot of it, the dirty secret is these deer farms that are moving these deers around the country and from Manitoba and whatnot, and it's spreading the stuff. But I appreciate what you're trying to do to keep it from being a big problem in North Dakota. I have a farm and ranch west of Mandan, and we're limited from baiting. It's not a problem. I get youth hunters out there and whatnot. It's not a problem. We just don't bait. We can hunt deer in North Dakota without baiting. If that's going to help fend off this chronic wasting disease, I'm all for it. And I appreciate the scientific research you guys are doing in prohibiting baiting. I'm all in on it. You can hunt deer without baiting deer. That is a fact.
You know what, sir? It's not whether we hunt. I'm in a unit, we don't hunt for bait. I'm a rancher, farmer, a school teacher. I can put in food plots and I have all ways to hunt it. You start talking with people out east where they have cattails, on cattails, and I'm not, if the game and fish, I told Casey this, if CWD did what EHD did to me last year.
Well, EHD took out 80% of our deer.
Okay, so, and here's another question to game fish. How many deer do we lose in Bismarck area from EHD?
A lot.
70%, 80%?
I mean, I couldn't give you a number because.
Everybody's guessing when you say it.
Why do we have a herd reduction season going on in the Bismarck area?
So.
What reason would that be? To decimate the deer herd? Because there was one case of CWD across the river?
Are you talking about the Bismarck City hunt?
Yeah, because that runs behind my house along Briardale and all that, and we don't have any deer. And I'm hopefully that sportsmen are smart enough not to go buy tags to shoot the last of the Mohicans, because we don't have any deer here.
Well, I mean, the city deer hunts are a lot different subject, right? I mean, the city deer hunts aren't something that we manage for numbers wise. We work with the city to try to reduce impacts associated with deer in the city limits and just beyond. And so, again, it's one of those things when, you want to maintain that, right? I mean, you want to maintain as far as some of those numbers go. I mean, we're not going to be growing our populations around by what we do in the city of Bismarck necessarily. So.
I understand it, but it's not just, it's like in the rural areas too, like in my backyard by Apple Creek. And again, I'm not saying, I just think that I understand when we had it because there was deer everywhere. But now we don't have deer. I mean, we really don't have deer. And so, and then the thing going back to the bait, I'm not against it. And I told Casey this, if you could show me that CWD actually is killing deer, because like I said, I've never seen it happen. I'm not anybody in this country that I've known that has seen a deer decimated or emaciated and dying from CWD. I've not seen it.
John, have you ever seen a deer killed by a mountain lion?
Pardon?
Have you ever seen a deer killed by a mountain lion, like in person? You've seen it?
No. I've seen one mountain lion.
So then, that's not real either. I just don't understand where you're coming from. Like,
okay, so they say, for example, they say CWD is always fatal. Okay, how do we know it's always fatal when we don't test live deer? So it's kind of like someone gets cancer. It's always fatal. It might be 20 years, it might be 10 years, it might be 8 years. But again, when you live in the country, you're around deer all the time, you hunt them all the time. I saw sick deer, all kinds of sick deer last year from EHD. Okay, and I'm not saying, like I said, hopefully we never get that with CWD. I could care less. If there was no baiting, it would help me 1,000 times more. I am able to hunt without bait. I do hunt without bait, but I worry about the kids. I worry about the disabled veterans that we take hunting. I worry about the disabled hunters that we take hunting. And when there's not the science to back it up, because there is no science that says baiting spread. we can say it was like the coronavirus. They covered up all the water fountains. For what reason? Because people were sucking on the water fountain? We thought it might cause a problem? Like I said, thinking that it might cause a problem is one thing, having it cause a problem is another thing. And I'm just worried about taking away opportunity that people don't have an opportunity like I do.
Well, one comment I'll make, and then I know we have others here as well, but since baiting has been, the first year that baiting was banned in 2009, right? And of course, the discussion always revolves around archery, usually with baiting. I mean, we've seen our archery licenses nothing but increase since 2009. So I mean, again, I don't know what, opportunity is being taken away or what data shows that is. I mean, we're not seeing it in our license sales by any means. So just to comment on that. Joe.
Same topic on baiting, turn it around a little bit. One of you guys said that you consider baiting a nutrition, positive nutrition thing for deer. I don't agree with that at all. You may feed, if you're gonna call that, you're gonna call it feeding deer, because you better feed them all winter long. The baiters are going to put their 5 gallons of bait out there. When they're not needing it, when they fill their tank or the end of the season comes, they're not going back out there. So those deer are gonna find some other place to find food. So the nutrition part of it is, I don't agree with it. I'm from the east, Wapton, North Dakota. I've never had a problem finding a tree to hunt deer out, ever. If I want to put my blind up by a cornfield, I can do that. You talked about baiting, or by that you're concerned about the deer, that population going down by your house north of Bismarck or somewhere by Bismarck. I have a cousin that lives north of Bismarck, and I don't know anything about this herd reduction deal. I know there is one, but I've never been part of it. He was out there and he had all kinds of deer on his place. Then this herd reduction came in. His neighbors all put bait out and asked all their friends to come out, invited them all out. He said his neighbors, if they'd come out to the bait pile, they would shoot a doe every night. And just like you even said, 100%, if you have bait out and you want to go out there with a bow or whatever, you'll have a likely 100% chance to shoot a doe every night time you go out there. And that's 100% correct, because I have hunted over bait and I never will again, because it's not hunting. It's totally, and all the kids you're taking out there to hunt over a bait pile, watching that camera, you are not teaching them how to hunt. You're teaching them how to go out and kill a deer. They're not learning how to hunt. And then you said that the bull kill was 20%. I don't know that number is correct or not, but I know it's going up every year, and it's because of baiting. You go out there and you don't have to hunt the deer with a bow. You go out there, you put your bait pile down, maybe 7 or 8 of them, you put your camera out there, and you sit at home and look at your phone and say, well, I'm going to go out and shoot that deer tonight. Or you bring the kid. I'm not against bringing kids out hunting. If you bring the kid out there, the first time they come out there, they're going to have a chance to shoot a deer. Well, that's not hunting. And and you talk about limiting opportunities. Well, once this bull kill goes up to 30%, we're going to totally lose our bow season. We're going to have one deer. We have to send in for a bow license or a rifle license. Now, if you don't think baiting is not limiting our opportunities, it will totally eliminate it in the future if we don't do something about the baiting and the technology.
Joe, I'm going to move on. Sorry, we've got other people that have their hands up.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I support your efforts in mitigating CWD in North Dakota. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I just want to, one last thing was that I would like to have North Dakota be known as the fair chase state, not the community state.
Gary.
First of all, I agree totally with that man. Then I have a couple of questions and one other comment. How many deer licenses did you guys give out? Was it 64,000?
64,200, I believe, 8,000 less than last year.
What's the percentage of hunters that actually turn in ahead so you guys can get a decent sample? Or do you even get a decent sample?
It's low, but to compare it to that total number is wrong because we don't necessarily sample the total state at a time. So like when you look at, I would have to ask Charlie or Brent. Unfortunately, Charlie couldn't be here, but like last year, Brent, saying 3F2, where we've done a lot of testing, people pretty much readily turn in heads because either they want to know or they want to help out. Do you remember what the percentage of?
I think it was like
holders?
3 or 4%
So it's-
where we were doing surveillance.
Yeah, and so it's pretty low. And in our plan, we talk about how we might increase that going forward across the state, but I'll just make one more mention on this plan. We, Dr. Charlie Bonson, we recorded some of the 3 meetings that we had across the state, but we recorded his presentation that explains the plan. So, you know, if you want to go on our website to see that without doing a whole nother 3-hour meeting, you can do that. But
Just one more comment I want to make. I think it'd be every one of us in here to think about what's best for the resource and not our own selfish interests about sitting over a bait pile so you can shoot a deer, which again, is really demand for Wapaton. That is not hunting. You aren't teaching kids how to hunt by sitting over a bait pile. So I think everybody better stop and take a look at what is best for the resource. We have professional people that are hired to do that, and I think we better support them.
Wayne? Okay.
Yeah, you know, I haven't read the wasting plan, but with this plan, are you guys also looking at, such as the feeding piece of it? You know, it is well known that the humic and the fulvic acid are pieces that they can mitigate that spread of that disease in certain areas. So if you have a concentration of CWD animals in a certain area, are you willing to look at those considerations as well? And also, you know, there's a recent study in the University of Wyoming has done where they found that the mutation of the CWD gene is mutating to the point that it's prolonging the life. So now this doe that has had it maybe year 2, she's living till year 5 or 6 and having that many more fawns coming forward. So that's also another consideration. I think that, you know, with populations that have heavy CWD animals, I think that's a mutation that's happening in certain areas. And there's a lot more studies that are happening nowadays, and I think we can mitigate some of this ahead of time. And I think that's the plan over here too, like the, you know, there's items out there that we can help our herd rather than to kill them. You know, I think that's a hard sell for a lot of us here to just go out and decimate herds. You know, we'd rather, you know, prolong that herds and have something for the future. So,
Yeah, so we'll go to the first one, like the humic acids and things like that they're looking at. Of course, you know, that takes, you got to spread it on the soil and you got to get enough. And in some cases, it kind of sterilizes the soil when you get enough to actually do it. So to ask this landowner on the west side if we can go out and sterilize your soil so we can get rid of CWD, that's not going to be as easy either. And so there is implications for that in the farm cervid world, whether you agree with farm cervids or not, you know, to maybe sterilize a pen or things like that at a little more reasonable cost benefit ratio, right? You know, when you talk about that allele or that gene, it's a I don't know if resistance is even the right word, but some deer do tend to live longer with that gene. They still succumb to the diseases in clinical trials that they've done it with that gene. Now in North Dakota, our herd is pretty young when you think of it. Now when you think of Wyoming, guys are shooting, you know, 7-8-year-old bucks or whatever. You know, I shot a doe last year that was 7.5, and I wish I would have known how old she was because she was tough. But you know, there may be, and hopefully nature helps us with this disease. I mean, that's the hope, you know, and we talk about there's only 70 deer that have tested positive. And, you know, the problem that we've seen so far with CWD where it is and where it's got a stronghold is once you're testing a majority of your deer positive, it's too late to do anything because it's everywhere, you know, and that's kind of the trick.
and I think, you know, this is a hot topic nationwide, and I think it's become a more political solution than a biological solution. And I think we have to go back to the biological solution and start looking at things rather than the political side of it. And I don't think that's utilized enough, but I think studies such as the Wyoming study and the feeding of these deer, supplementing them. If you have some rancher down in 302 that has a haystack full of deer, and he's known to have CWD down there, I don't think it would behoove him harm at all to have a humic acid and fulvic acid set up there to sterilize and maybe supplement those deer somewhat in that feed source, maybe along the CWD life of those animals or something. I think there's ways that maybe we could do it, that biological piece will take a step forward more than the political piece. So,
Yeah, I mean, Wayne, I can't say I disagree with you on that. I mean, I think that, you know, Brent and Charlie, you know, are some pretty progressive, you know, wide awake, young folks that are would take advantage of any opportunity out there to do that. And this is, I'm gonna steal a statement from Casey that he's always said with us too. And this is why this discussion is important. And if anybody didn't notice, there's some difference of opinions, right? You know, but I do appreciate the cordial conversation with it. But one of the things Casey's always said, and he's right on, is that, I mean, is this a way to buy us a little time, you know, keeping the prevalence rate somewhat low to where some of the science and some of those, you know, methodology out there could potentially be some solutions out there. I mean, I think that's very realistic. And if there are some things out there that are proven, and, you know, again, I mean, I guarantee you that Brent and Charlie are gonna recommend that to us. And so these guys are up on all that information, follow it closely, and I trust their guidance, you know, as recommendations when it comes to that. This gentleman's been waiting for a little while. Sorry.
What's being done with these deer, say that are moving into small towns, elevators, they come in hundreds of them at a time. Got a neighborhood, 300 of them out in the silage pile, this hay pile. What's being done with that? And then the other thing is, can this move to cattle?
It has not been shown to jump to cattle, jump out of the cervid family, the deer family. And we haven't found it in our moose or elk yet in North Dakota either. Some other states have found it in moose and elk. They've started to find it in caribou, reindeer, in some places. But so luckily, it doesn't seem to be a cervid family jumper. And we hope it stays that way, because if it ever did, they'd be vermin, right? Across. It's kind of like when if we had TB in an area, you know, all alarms go off and you know.
What action is the state taking with this? I've got a son-in-law that he allows hunters to come out, and he lives right on the river bottoms, and they're all over his haystacks, and the game and fish told him to come in and pick up a snow fence and a loud noise maker.
So
they're gonna jump a snow fence.
So we have some things in place that we work with producers that have livestock feeds, especially livestock feed stores. And when you call and it's the winter time, it's obviously hard to put fence posts in and things like that. And so one of the ways that we do is we wrap snow fence around them, and it does work depending on how the bales are stacked and some of that stuff. And that's temporary. What we'd really like is to get that guy through that winter and then have them put up a permanent hay yard that we supply all the materials and a cost share even to put it up. And so, you know, we do have ways we can work with folks to try to get a permanent solution when that happens. But, you know, when they call in the dead of winter and all those deer are there, it's really tough at that point to put up a permanent solution for that time period. And so we have the screamers and sirens and things. They are temporary type of things that maybe help reduce the damage, help, you know, keep them from coming back, and then wrap it with the snow fence, and try to get them through that winter without losing all of their stuff, so that we can get to a situation where we can put up a permanent type of solution to that.
And we'll visit afterwards and get, you know, contact information, those, because we have, you know, right now we've been pretty aggressive with that over these last several years, with going back to individuals that have had previous hay yards, if they need, you know, updated materials, those types of things. And, you know, like Casey said, we supply all the materials, deliver them to you, even then have a cost share as far as putting those things up, and they work very well. So
you guys can imagine the stuff that you've been trying to buy for whatever business you're in or whatever isn't getting any easier to get lately. And so we were really working hard this this summer and fall and trying to get some hay yard stuff ordered so that as we come out of winter, you know, we've got some for producers to put on the ground as soon as the ground starts to thaw out, so we can get some of those permanent solutions out there for that. This back here.
I'd like to turn the corner just a little bit.
Thank you.
Take a look at the youth hunters. I'm talking the youth season for the 11, 12, and 13-year-olds. It's the whitetail doe only season. And I guess I'd like consideration or some thought given maybe to moving that season later. The does that are encountered during that time of the year, if they have a fawn with them, most of the time, the fawn still has spots. And that's a turnoff for the youth to shoot that doe and have a fawn or two fawns with spots run off or get distressed. And then the other thing along with that, it's for white-tailed does only. And after last year with the HD outbreak, in some areas, there's hardly any white-tailed does. But in a lot of areas, there's some muley does that really could be harvested, and landowners would probably welcome that. So I'm throwing that out as two ideas to consider, moving that season later and leaving it to the discretion of the landowner if he wants white-tailed does or muley does taken.
You want to tackle that, or you want me to?
Yeah, well, I can tackle it, and you can fill in where I missed. So the white-tailed doe thing, not that it can't be done, but that's in statute through legislation, so we will need to go through that. When that season was set up, you know, they didn't want those youth really going out to the Badlands units to shoot mule deer does, where we really kind of manage the mule deer as a mule deer herd. Now, when you get out, for example, I live in 2K1, and there's getting to be quite a few mule deer running around, and you know, I'll get friends that call all the time with their kid, like, so we can't shoot the mule deer, right? Right. It's a whitetail doe only license. You know, the timing of the season, it gets to be a lot of questions when they start talking about, for one, you want them to be the only ones out there, right? You want them to not have to compete against, for one, people who are buck hunting and don't want to let people on their land, other hunters out there, and then you always, whether it happens or not, you always hear the story of dad's just going to shoot their deer if they're allowed to carry a gun, or brother or uncle or whoever's taking them out. And so to eliminate some of those concerns and some of those reasons, it gets put there. Now, obviously, yeah, you're going to run into some pretty young fawns, and the choice, like with my children, my boys, has always been like, well, this is what happens if you shoot this deer versus trying to wait for another one or whatever that might be, you know. But it's a legal deer, and I'm always under the belief that if it's legal, it's their choice to pull the trigger. I'm never going to tell them not to or not, you know. But the other thing we hear sometimes too is it's too hot then, you know, or there's too many crops up, and really the purpose of it wasn't necessarily to make sure that youth kills a deer. Okay. And so the purpose was to give them an opportunity to go out when it can be just them and their mentor, not have to worry about other pressures, and things like that. And then you start looking at other seasons that butt up, and we get complaints too that the youth seasons kind of overlap a little bit, but we're running out of dates to have them without overlapping other seasons, to give youth just their opportunity without competition. Now, if we feel like they can go in and have competition, you know, less likely to get on land, less likely to, you know, these kinds of things because of competition, we could do that, but yeah, so those are the reasons it's in place. I'm not saying right or wrong, or could it be moved, you know, maybe, but.
Well, I just throw it out there for consideration.
Yep.
Because it's pretty hard. I don't know that it's a good experience for a youth to go out there and bump a doe with a couple fawns and they say, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna shoot that. I'm not sure that's a good teachable moment for the youth. I think if you had it mid-October, I agree, trying to keep it away from the rifle season, definitely, you know, but mid-October would give that fawn another month. And the conditions we have here right now, if that doe were shot in mid-September, now 2 months later, we have these weather conditions, that fawn, or those fawns would have a poor chance of survivability.
Yeah, definitely. Yep.
One of the things I'll offer on this, Dean, we had a good discussion about this the other night, actually in Emden. And one of the challenges, you know, well, even when the 14, 15-year-old youth season came about, is like Casey was talking about, is where do you put it? And one of the biggest challenges is running into pheasant season, then you run into access issues, right? And so, you know, one of the things that we talked about the other night in Emden, and I think Bill brought it up too, it's almost to the point of where, you know, we leave it the way it is, or you run it to the end of the year. You know, I mean, and just because then you're not then you're not really focusing it in one particular area, you know, overlapping into some seasons and those types of things. But I know that probably doesn't have its, you know, I know that's not super popular though either. So it's just a matter of where do you fit that in there?
Yeah, I didn't think about the pheasant season, but that would be an issue.
Yeah, you know, I know landowners that'll let anybody go hunting for anything outside of pheasant season or outside of deer season, or maybe both, but it's like you seem to hit those two species in the main seasons and, you know, it gets harder.
Well, it's news to me that it was a legislative thing, but I let anybody youth hunt on our land, except for the doe September season, because I just can't bring myself to allowing them shooting a doe with these spotted fawns next to them. It just seems like cruel and unusual, and the fawns I don't think will ever make it.
Great.
Couple of questions about some of the programs you guys are involved in, your great programs, plots. Kind of what's trends on plots, how's plots working out, and then your Meadowlark initiative. Can you speak to those couple programs?
For sure.
Yeah, I'll hit plots and then I'll let Greg hit on the Meadowlark initiative. So we're under 800,000 acres in our plots program right now. You know, we had the boom of 3 million acres of CRP. And when you think about when we had 1 million acres of plots, it was pretty cheap to have good cover. We had people lined up out the door with CRP contracts in hand, ready to put an access payment on top of that. And that access payment, you know, wasn't a lot compared to what FSA was paying, the rental rate and things like that to do that. Now, CRP has had many challenges over the last few years, acres caps. We're down to around 1 million acres, maybe teetering underneath that as far as the FSA program goes. And so when you think of plots and how we get habitat on the plots, that's exponentially more expensive for us now, if we're going to do something that looks like the CRP program. And honestly, this is probably the lowest habitat I've ever seen in my lifetime right now in North Dakota, across the state in general. And so, you know, we're working pretty hard to those people that are in plots. You know, we have and Craig, you know, people that have been in for quite a while and they're willing to do some stuff and willing to work with and try to improve those plots contracts that we have on the ground. And also, you know, we're working with new folks, but the time it takes to line up grass seedings, line up people to grass seed, and you know this, Craig, all those things to get habitat on the ground, or even some of the other stuff that we've done where we've tried to help producers improve grazing systems to benefit both their production and wildlife, by installing, you know, water tanks and different fences and things like that. So, you know, we're working hard to do that, but it's an uphill struggle. For one, having the manpower and time and money to put a lot of those on the ground when we don't have that mass of CRP that was out there. Because I always liked, when I was in the PLI program, there was a plots tract that I signed up south of Mott and had 4 tree rows in it in a wheat field. It was, you could shoot your limit of pheasants every day, all day on that piece. That piece of ground doesn't look any different today. You cannot find a pheasant on it. Well, there's no CRP around it anymore. It used to be all CRP. And so it was like this, they were coming into those tree rows and things to feed, and people could hunt them, you know, even though the CRP was off limits. And so that piece doesn't look any different, but everything around it looks different. And so that makes a big difference too. And so, you know, we're looking at ways, you know, there's only so many producers that are going to want to let carte blanche everybody all day on, right? And I get it, you know, but we do have some of those, and they're obviously in our plots program. But we do feel like we've got a lot of producers that would do some habitat work that don't fit into that box. And so we're exploring ways that we can maybe do some of that work too, moving forward. And so that's kind of in its infancy as we're digging into that, and our private lands guys and gals are digging into that. And so that's the plots program in a nutshell. We're plenty busy, you know, trying to do that stuff. And so, yeah, looking forward. You know, there's maybe some other funding sources or things or other programs that we've tried to tap into through NRCS and things they kind of want more collaborative partnership type of programs and grants that you can go for. And so we've been going for some of those too. And some of those, and that's where I'll roll it into the Meadowlark Initiative, because one of those grants is kind of what spurred the Meadowlark Initiative, which includes plots and a lot of other partners programs. But Link, I'll let Greg Link, I'll let you go.
So thanks for asking, Craig. So the Meadowlark Initiative, for those that you don't, those of you who don't know what it's really about, it's really our native grassland conservation strategy. It's not just game and fish. It's a lot of partners. And so we're looking here, the last time we did our state wildlife action plan, that's the plan that we use to address our rare and declining species, to kind of keep them from slipping into that threatened and endangered red zone there. So what we were really doing, we were looking at what do we do for all these different species, and it's really taking care of those native habitats. And one of those very important ones in a grassland state is obviously our native grasslands. Our native grasslands bring a lot of biodiversity for a lot of different species, especially our specialist species that kind of do certain things. So as we were looking at, you know, it's not like we haven't been working on this through the years. It's just that, guess what? The needle keeps going this way. We're down to about a quarter of our native grassland that's left in the state. And of that, it's getting invaded, it's getting degraded, it's chipped and getting pretty abused. And so what we really are saying is going, hey, all hands on deck, we need to move the needle. We need to start stemming the decline, start taking better care of it, and do what we can. So guess who is out there taking care of that? It's the private ranchers and farmers. I mean, in North Dakota, we have 94% private land. So that's where that important habitat, is. And so it's not, it's everything around it. It's everything that's happening when we have a lot of development in this state, oil, gas, energy, just a lot of things going on. And it's nobody's fault. It's just the way it is. So, but in order to take care of it, to do a better job, it's really going, hey, how do we be proactive rather than reactive? Let's do something about it. We gathered up a bunch of partners and said, let's be very intentional. Let's be very focused. Try to move that needle. And so we went and got a grant from USDA Wildlife, USDA NRCS. That's really kind of meant to do that for partnerships. We got a $10 million or a $7 million grant to tap in with the 10 million that our partners brought to the table. And so we're doing everything from trying to regenerative grazing, helping ranchers combat invasive species, just kind of help them, again, boost the diversity of our native grasslands. So last year was the first year of really that USDA sign up. We started in November, and basically through this winter and spring, we kind of found out what they got as far as interest. We had, of that $7 million, we kind of really went, figuring we were going to probably spend $1 million, we spent $2.5 million. We had interest. And so how did that translate into acres? I don't have those figures right in front of me. We're really kind of just finishing up the year and going, we're going to have a kind of accomplishment roll up here at the end of the year to see, but it's not just NRCS, it's all those different partners Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, Audubon, Dakota, a lot of different folks doing different things in different places of the state. But again, it's all in a kind of a consistent matter of going, hey, let's give ranchers tools, watering systems, fencing, whatever it is they need. I mean, sometimes it's chemical to combat brush. It might actually be get some mechanical treatments out there, but we're also trying to get new grass on the landscape, grass that takes a little while to get started because it's native mixes, but it's really trying to get those species out there that are going to be very resilient, deep-rooted species that can be there for a long time. Integrate livestock. That's the intent, is really to get livestock on it. We know those folks that are running livestock out there they're getting stressed just as much as our critters are, and so again, we want to do whatever we can to help. So I don't know, long answer to a probably short question.
Question with that, you know, with the working with the ranchers and farmers, what kind of stipulations are gonna be going with that? Like, so like, you know, when the CRP versus plots is open up to the public, how are you guys handling that with that initiative? If you're gonna go in and put native grass and you have a rancher that's wants to put in native grass, watering systems, is that tied to automatically opening it up to?
Nope. It has no public access as part of it at all. I mean, obviously, Game and Fish can come along and go, hey, would you like to have some public access slapped on top of it? It's another payment to you, but that's totally voluntary, willing, you know, up to them. It's really about trying to keep grass green side up. And so each partner may have a little bit different provisions built in it, but it's basically going, let's get the grass out there. Let's try to keep it there for a while, you know.
I think that's a great idea, because I think you're gonna have more private landowners participating in it when it's not tied to certain things.
Right, and we're gonna be talking, I think, as an agency, just as we move forward, not just through Meadowlark Initiative, but really, like Casey said, we're kind of up against it in some habitat situations for certain critters. And if it's gonna be about trying to get that habitat back out there, we're gonna have to do it for habitat's sake, not just for public access. We can always come back and slap again public access agreement if a landowner is willing, but we really got to get some of that habitat out there. So, yeah, question.
Are there incentives in that program that would touch on like a private landowner to keep wetlands there, as those are kind of a natural part of the prairie, or preventing maybe tilling up a quarter of pasture and converting it to row crops or anything like that? Is there any incentives in that program to try to stave some of that off? Because I mean, we're losing 1 million to 2 million acres of native grass in the country per year. So it's a significant, you know, movement in terms of, you know, agriculture, which is fine. But, you know, as you say, you know, we're getting to a point where we're losing way too much of it.
Yeah, I mean, again, we've gone through some, you know, different cycles of the, you know, commodity market, things like that are obviously drivers, but there's some cases where some, you know, landowners converted some land and went, boy, now it just doesn't seem like you're in, you're out, it's producing. I mean, we have probably a better opportunity as producers to kind of see the inputs. With precision ag, we can see per acre the inputs we're putting on and kind of the return we're getting on some of those acres. And some of those acres, if they aren't really turning the buck like we thought they could, those are some acres that we could put back into, again, perennial grass. But the wetland aspect, yes, obviously in central North Dakota, we have a lot of wetlands embedded in grasslands or in those areas that were converted sitting out there now. So it impacts those wetlands. Those wetlands get more vulnerable to siltation and things like that. So yes, that's a part of it. So landowners that want to restore wetlands, or again, put grass around them, that helps for those health of those wetlands. There's some other aspect you brought up that I was going to touch on, but it's
trying to prevent that first tilling of
right.
Incentive.
Right. So there's a tool. I mean, we're kind of looking at what do ranchers need, what do producers need, and last year we kind of did hear from producers saying, hey, do you have a program that helps me be viable, helps me keep that grass there, you know, kind of a midterm agreement that gives me a little money to keep it from converting. You know, I got neighbors that might want to lease it for farming. I'd rather keep it grass, but when you look at the two, so we're pursuing, we tried to get some dollars here recently in a grant. We weren't successful in that, but we've been looking at trying to get you know, like a 25 to 50 year agreement, something that's for the life of that operator is going, during my watch, while I'm here, I want this to stay grass. I got an agreement here that helps me do that, help me be viable, help me be prosperous. So we're looking for a means to get some dollars to do that. That's one of the tools we feel is missing in the tool bag.
What about improvements to trust lands? Those are owned by the state, they're open to hunters, they're usually like a square mile, got a lot of room to work with.
Yeah. I mean, those are our native grasslands too. They're very important. Public lands, we're talking about our own like wildlife management areas as well. But yeah, that's a very important piece of that too. I'll let Casey.
I'll hit on it a little bit. The trust lands, of course, we do have a lot of conversations with them on, things going around habitat and all this kind of stuff. But one thing we have to realize is their mission is different. I know it's public land, but like, say for game and fish wildlife management areas, our mission is to create critters and have a place to hunt them, right? The trust lands department, that's not their mission to do that, even though a lot of us in this room would love that to be their mission. Their mission is to make money for the schools. Now, one thing that they've done over time is they've realized that if they let it get degraded to the point where it becomes less worth it to bid on it, the stocking rates need to go down and things like that, that doesn't benefit them either. And so they're making some strides in some of the stuff they do. It's not going to look like a wildlife management area, right? Just because it's public land. But in a lot of cases, they are making some strides, and they have been working with some other partners. There was an OHF grant, I believe, that went to the Natural Resources Trust to help put water structure, maybe wells or things like that, on state trust land. So the thing that we have to remember is the state trust land doesn't want to spend a bunch of money because their job is to make money for the school system. And so anything that's on that state trust land piece is owned by the lessee, fences, water structures, and things like that. So it gets a little trivial to put a big expensive well for a landowner or a lessee who may only have a piece for 5 years and then get outbid, just because of the way their process is, and that's the way the process is set up in state law. And so we have to realize, and even, we'll hear people complain about what other, you name it, Fish and Wildlife Service, they're doing something wrong. Well, if you're a deer hunter, they might be. If you're a duck hunter, that's their job, right? That's what their lands are for. And we get a lot of benefit of other species from some of the things that they do on their lands. But so to look at things, that way. But yeah, I mean, we're in conversations with state trust lands and things like that all the time. And there was just one not too long ago that they weren't able to rent and make money on. And so the department actually purchased it from them to use as a wildlife management area. And so things like that can happen, and we're always in touch with them. But yeah, we just have to be cognizant of trying not to force them to be a wildlife management agency. That's not their goal. But there's a lot of land that they do control in the state. And so anytime we have a chance to make it better, we can. Andy?
Casey, can you talk a little bit about tag counts potential for 2023? And then more specifically, I know last year, about this time, you guys said, you needed to do your counts. So I'm wondering, are you guys gonna try to do your counts this year to get some good numbers? And like a lot of people have said, we're totally decimated by EHD.
Yep.
And I got like 10 animals on my place. We would be holding 200 to 250 right now, and they're just gone.
Yeah.
And I was getting questions from people at work with 3C tag wanting to go hunting because they can't find a deer. And I was thinking we cut all the tags from 3C.
We cut all the whitetail tags.
That was probably.
Yeah, but there's some any tags that were still out there, so they could have harvested a mule deer with that. And some people asked us to just give out a mule deer license then. That does a whole nother ripple effect through the system, and most of us know that, but it adds non-resident any archery licenses when we add just mule deer licenses. And we knew we had some landowners in 3C that felt like they had plenty of mule deer. And so we didn't want to cut them off altogether. But we did, like we said, 3C didn't have any whitetail licenses, 3B3 got cut back considerably, and we had the herd reduction season north of town that obviously got shut off in 3B3, and so.
What are thoughts going into this next coming year?
Yeah.
I can tell you, I don't know if we have much recruitment at all.
Mhm.
I mean, it's very, very slim pickings.
Yeah, so we'll get our hunter surveys back, of course. And we'll get some archery surveys back, and I don't think we're gonna hear anything different than you're saying right there, Andy. But also we'll fly it if we get good conditions. Last year, it was weird because we didn't have any conditions. Then we got the blizzard and it's like, can we fly the whole state in 3 days before it all melts? So that didn't happen either. We only got so many pilots, so many people that don't throw up when they're in a plane, and things like that. And so, it hopefully, we were actually looking with this first blizzard, it's like, yes, we're gonna get it, blessing and a curse, right? In some of our realm. But then now we're probably down to not realistic with the amount that we've lost. But if we get the snow cover, we're definitely flying. And doing as much as we can to figure that out. And I'm not going to project because I haven't even seen, harvest success and things like that from some of the other surveys and stuff. And of course, the archery one, we won't really get completed until the end of January after the season closes. But yeah, I wouldn't suspect a large hike in whitetail licenses, and it's not something that, we're going to be real interested in adding whitetail licenses, maybe if we don't have to, with the way it went along the Missouri River corridor here, so.
Question I guess I would ask the folks in there is, observation wise in this, has anybody been surprised at what you've seen?
I saw 40 antelope today just west of New Salem, and I saw a bunch of them up by Napoleon the other day. So, I've seen more antelope, and by our farm, I saw a few antelope.
Yeah.
Are they rebounding a bit?
Our overall antelope counts last year were up. However, the fawn or kid production of antelope was the lowest we've ever seen. And probably because of the almost 2-year drought. But we did have enough critters on the landscape for antelope that we do have all of the units open this year, south and west of the river. So that was a good sign, but yeah, it's a little bit of a up and a down on that whole antelope thing because of the fawn production was pretty low.
Casey, could you or Greg speak to the North American Grasslands Conservation Act that was recently introduced into the Senate? Stem the tide of grassland destruction and what that would mean financially.
Yeah, it's a good piece of legislation, federal legislation. It basically is mimicking what was created years ago with the North American Waterfowl Act, the Conservation Act, which has brought a lot of dollars to North Dakota. In that case, it was for wetland conservation. But likewise, this would be similar, and it would be used for exactly what we've been talking about. It would just basically be another tool for those same goals and objectives we have in our Meadowlark initiative, really to take care of our native grassland. So this isn't just a North Dakota problem. This is a national problem. We have declining grassland birds. Of all the guilds of birds, our grassland birds are the ones that are diving the steepest. But we have all these critters that you guys are talking about, whether it's our sharp tails, whether it's our deer, are very dependent on grasslands, our native grasslands. And so as a nation, other states, we've been working regionally, we've been working tri-national, Mexico, Canada, and even here in America, North America. How do we address this situation? We've got declining grassland birds. They come up here on the breeding grounds, down there in the wintering grounds. It's all those impacts are there too. And so, as a nation, we can probably do better. But let's put some money into some resources that address native grasslands. So that's really what that act's about.
Do you have any idea what the fiscal note would be like?
Yeah, I did, but I don't have it.
Did Senator Hovind and Kramer support that bill?
I don't think they have yet. You know, we're gonna be talking about RAWA, and as I think states, that one's been in the hopper, you know, for many years. That's very important to a lot of things that we do. And I think that's where everybody's kind of focusing right now, but knowing that, again, we've been talking about this, National Grassland Conservation Act, or North American Conservation Act. It's just that I think it's, you know, this is the first year it's been introduced, and so it takes a while to get people up to speed and have those conversations, but it's important and it's the right thing to do, so.
Quick question about the Meadowlark Initiative, taking a step back. The lands that are being put back in, is there a concentration of those areas within the state? Is it mostly east? Is it central? Is it?
Yeah, great question. Because, I mean, we're really trying to build off of existing grasslands. So what we call them, those are our fortresses, you know? And so we want to build off of that. We want to buffer those. We want to connect them, reconnect them. We want to fill in the holes. It's really like, you know, the torn and ripped blanket. You kind of want to suture up the holes and patch up the areas. And so that's really where the priority area is. So obviously it's more central to western North Dakota. But, you know, again, partners are working in different places. They have their focus areas too, but that's really the strategy behind it. We have maps that kind of show where our existing native grasslands are, and within a couple miles off of those grasslands is where we're really trying to be strategic, but they're doing work other places as well.
Thanks, Greg. Yep. I know there's probably some more questions here. Again, we've had great dialogue, but we also have some agenda topics that we want to get to. And so what we'll do is we'll move on to those. And then afterwards, if there's still some time, and then obviously at the end of the meeting, we're going to be around here as well too. So, but right now, Scott's going to visit about some both federal and state legislation that we have coming up. But I do, before Scott gets going, I want to recognize an individual in the room. We have Representative Karen Carls here, and sorry to embarrass you, Representative Carls, but I do want to say this. As long as I've been at the Game and Fish Department, there's probably been as many advisory board meetings that she has attended in this room as many of you and ourselves. She's been very dedicated attendant, and it's really appreciated her interest she's taken, and not even on on the Natural Resource Committee, just been a really good legislator as far as paying attention to the issues we have going on, and we've always really appreciated that. So thanks for being here.
Very good.
So, yeah. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things on your agenda. We're kind of moving into that second hour, and the first of which is something that Greg already referenced, and we refer to it as RAWA. It's federal legislation, but that stands for Recovering America's Wildlife Act. If passed, now it would provide a pretty substantial amount of money to North Dakota. It's in the tune of about $14 million annually, which would be, you know, again, by my math, Montpelier High, that would be about $28 million per biennium, and that would add about a third to our existing biennial budget. If RAWA is passed, and by the way, it has already passed the House and will hopefully be voted on in the Senate yet this year. But the legislation and the dollars intended solely to help states management recovery of species of conservation priority, species in population decline. We talked about one of those species already tonight, like our western meadowlark. I think I just asked this the other day. We have 115 species listed in North Dakota in that category, and many of those species are grassland dependent species. And so we would use that money again to put habitat on the ground in strategic places to help a lot of those species. And we're talking about species that many of you know about, like the western meadowlark or maybe even the monarch butterfly, but there's also some species in there that you probably didn't know existed, like for instance, a rusty patched bumblebee. Now I'm pretty sure it's in species that's a species that's in population decline, because when's the last time you've seen? Darryl, when's the last time you've seen a rusty patched bumblebee?
They used to lick their backs.
Yeah. That's how it got rusty. So anyway, the legislation, we're tracking this very closely because again, it would bring a substantial amount of money to North Dakota. And again, I want to make sure that everybody is clear on one thing, that money is for the sole purpose of helping us manage, the recovery of those species of conservation priority. It won't be used for anything but that. And our goal, would be to get use as much of that money to get habitat out on the landscape. And really, if you think about this, the overall goal of RAWA would be to keep those species off of the threatened endangered species list, which would help everybody in this room in one way or another. So that's kind of what RAWA is all about. If we had been talking about this late summer, I would think that our optimism about having this passed this calendar year would have been much higher than it is now. But we're still told that there's a chance that it could be voted on in the Senate before the end of the calendar year. And if it doesn't happen, then we're kind of back to square one because we have new members coming into Congress and then all bets are off and we have to kind of start over. So anyway, that's kind of in a nutshell what RAWA is about. Does anybody have any questions about that?
In that bill that hunters and fishermen won't like, there's always strings attached with federal money. Is there going to be restrictions on lead fishing tackle and lead shot?
No, I can't. I mean, obviously I can't think of anything that hunters and anglers should be concerned about. And anytime, the other thing, I guess, that I'm glad you asked that question because it reminded me of a point I wanted to make, but if we can get habitat on the ground to help those species, it's also going to help those species like the ones we like to hunt, right? You put habitat on the ground, it's not just going to help Dakota skipper or a rusty patch bumblebee, it's also going to help pheasants, sharp-tailed grouse, deer, waterfowl, and everything else. And so I think it's I don't know if you believe in win-wins, but I think it would be. I really do. There's nothing in it that we would tell you that you should be concerned about. Good question, though. Any other questions about RAWA? So then I'm going to move on to the other thing that I was going to talk about, and that's potential legislation. And so, as everybody here knows, in these odd numbered years, our state legislature comes to town, and obviously things happen that affect the way we manage our fish and wildlife resources. This year will be no different. And so, when we have our fall round of advisory board meetings in the even numbered years, we like to talk about what we're hearing about in terms of potential legislation and what might be out there that we see coming. And honestly, we don't have a lot to talk about. One of them touches on a subject that we've already talked about tonight, and that's chronic wasting disease / baiting. We're hearing that there's a pretty high likelihood that there is going to be legislation introduced that would essentially take away the department's authority to ban hunting over bait. We haven't seen any language, don't know really exactly what it's going to say. And so we'll see how that goes. Again, there was I think Casey or Jeb touched on the fact that there was an effort in 2007 to ban baiting statewide. That got somewhat contentious, and this may as well, but again, we'll see how that goes. Another piece of legislation that we're, again, and any of this is, for us, it's just in preliminary phases, early discussion phases, but we have a legislator up in the north central part of the state that's interested in really doing two things: putting more habitat on the ground, but also incentivizing landowners to enroll more land into our plots program. And his idea to do that would be to give those landowners some sort of property tax relief. And when he talked to us about it, of course, our typical answer when people call us and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this through legislation or that through legislation, would the department support it?" And our answer is typically, we need to see the legislation before we can support it. Because if a lot of legislation, one word change can change the context of an entire bill. And I would like to say, if you change the word may to shall, it changes everything. And so we're just very excited about the possibility here, but we also have to be careful on a couple of fronts. Number one, we know that there's going to be other legislation introduced. There's going to be other versions of a property tax relief bill. And we don't we want to be very careful not to get crossways with other legislators and other versions of those property tax bills. But again, at least we're talking about the fact that we need more habitat, in terms of quantity and quality habitat out there. And so we're looking forward to seeing what that bill is how it's going to read. The other thing that we, in this case, that we got to be a little bit sensitive to and a little bit careful of is the fact that we already at times, we hear concerns from area landowners that are, say, like our plots rental payments. If they get high, and if we incentivize landowners too much, we don't want to be necessarily accused of being in direct competition to a neighbor who may have wanted that grass for pasture or hay. And so we always got to be a little sensitive to that too. But at the bottom line is, we look very much forward to seeing some legislation that would do a couple things: increase plots enrollment and increase habitat on the landscape at the same time. What's not to like about that? Rob?
How dire is our situation with habitat statewide? I mean, I know it's going to be very localized in some areas, but for years, that's always been the thing since CRP's gone down the shitter. Is we've talked about habitat in all these meetings. Is it continuing to get worse, or have we staved it off, or are things looking up, or what's?
Well, I think we're down to a little less than 1 million acres of CRP, Casey, and then and Greg also talked about. So yeah, we're still losing ground there. Coupled with the fact that we're seeing grassland conversion more and more all the time. So I can't even say that we've stabilized that. We're losing habitat still.
CRP, all that, having 3.4 million acres of that grass on the landscape masked a lot of things that were happening during that period. We were losing other things, but once we started losing CRP,
it bought us some time.
Yeah,
it bought us some time. Yeah.
So, just what we're talking about tonight, whether it's deer populations, whether it's, there's just a lot of populations that weren't rebounding like they did back when we had that 3.4 million acres. So.
Yes, sir.
Talking about your plots, I talked to several ranchers in one of the units that I hunted. They were saying that there were so many hunters down there that one of the roads looked like Walmart. He said that he was a ranch manager of a very large ranch, and he said that they were recommending that they do not renew. So you guys are gonna have a challenge to get some of those plots back in place again. I'm afraid that we're gonna lose more. I don't know if there's other incentives that you can give to these guys, but.
Well, it's one of the things that we're always talking about, and we'd love to get that, that number one. Okay, so I don't know if everybody here is aware of the fact that we had years ago an established goal of 1 million acres. We've been somewhat below that for the last several years, but for us, it's more than just a goal of getting a quantity of plots. We're also much more concerned about the quality. And so the two things have to kind of go hand in hand, but our guys are always brainstorming about ways to incentivize that and to get more acres out there. So, yeah. Any other questions on any of that stuff that I covered? Yes.
You guys had a plots program I know that my neighbor used where you supplied the seed and then they would seed the cover crop. And I believe you gave a payment to the landowner too, and then they had to leave it stand until March, and then they could turn their cattle in. And I don't know if you still have that or not, but that was a really effective program. I don't know how many hunters I saw in there, and I heard there was tons of birds and deer in there at the time. This was probably 3-4 years ago, but if you got anything like that, those are ideas that actually put cover on those places. It'd be really good.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, that is a, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, so we still have that availability, so it's up to 5 acres of seed. We don't pay for establishment, but we provide the seed for free. And so this winter you can look for it, like, was it February, I think, Levi's, when it's something like that, it's a deadline. So look to sign up, it's free. We get it delivered to our district offices, and you can swing by and pick it up. And yeah, it's a good deal. For sure.
You might be talking though too, Andy, about our actual food plot, program as well too. Levi, I don't know if you want to talk about that too, but where there is a payment type situation there that goes along with that. It's a lot of times it's just a matter of being able to get those acres that somebody's willing to give up, from production standpoint, but.
A lot of times with the plots program, that's just an option to make a little bit more on total payment. And we pay a rate established and then a soil rental rate too. And like you said, come March, harvest it, whatever's left, or put the cows on there.
And as far as cover crops go, there is lots of other agencies, groups that have cover crop programs that if the landowner wanted to put it, say, in plots, we would do that. NRCS has a cover crop program, Pheasants Forever has a cover crop I mean, like, there's a lot of those out there. It's just, if producers are willing to do it. One thing about cover crops that's always tricky is for a producer to really see the benefits of cover cropping, it's not a one-year deal. Depending on the state of their soils, it's not a one-year deal, they gotta stick with it. And that gets hard sometimes when it's like, put a cover crop in and it's like, oh, I didn't see this great thing, why keep doing it? So you get kind of these flashes of ins and outs with cover crop, unless you really get that person that sticks with it to the point where they start seeing the benefits, reducing their fertilizer and all those kinds of things. And now all of a sudden it's like they're hooked, and that's where you want to get them. Yeah, there's a lot of other groups and agencies that have cover crop programs too.
So if there are no other questions on legislation, I'm going to sit down and let the big game guys give their big game update. Keisha, are you doing that or?
I think I'll do it. I got it.
All right. Otherwise we're playing rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah. So a few other things that I want to just hit on here. If you picked one up, there's this map that was sitting back there, and right off we've put together a group. We've only met once, and I'm going to make an official apology to Bow Hunters Association, Daryl and Brock, the backcountry hunters and anglers, and Wayne, who's on the group, looking at these Badlands. It started off kind of as the Badlands archery pressure, what's going on up there, and we've changed some things on our archery survey now for 2 years, and our statistician will tell you 3 years makes a trend, which makes information usable with fairly good confidence to be able to derive any kind of ideas or things about what's going on. And so this will be the 3rd year. Chad is still working on putting some things together, and of course archery season won't be over till the end of December, and we'll get those in. And then our group will definitely get back together and start hammering some other things out. One thing we hear a lot about is there's a lot of non-residents out there, right? And let's make no mistake, if any changes are made with this whole situation, opportunity is lost for somebody, okay? So, we talked about opportunity in other ways, but this isn't just an opportunity of how good you can harvest a deer or not. This is opportunity to hunt. Is going to be lost by somebody if we make changes to the system. I want to make that clear. So we don't want to just jump into this necessarily. Okay. But one thing I wanted to just show everybody is the non-resident any archery license is derived from 15% of the mule deer licenses that we give out. Okay, that's where it came back to that, adding just mule deer license to 3C or some of these other units where we really aren't necessarily managing for mule deer themselves. It adds to the pool. But right now, the units that have these little numbers in parentheses are the units that drive those any non-resident any deer archery licenses. Okay. Once they get one of those, they can hunt anywhere in the state for any deer. The other non-resident archery license we have is the whitetail only tag, and that's over the counter. There's no drawing for that. So as you can see, like 3B1, for example, there's 150 licenses that are derived in that pool from 3B1. Okay. So if you look down at the bottom, this year we gave out 810 non-resident any deer archery licenses. Last year there were 780. Seems like a pretty small amount when you think of all the deer licenses we give out. But if all those people go to the same spot, and that happens to be where Daryl goes or where somebody else goes, that looks like a heck of a lot of them, right? We talked about pressure on plots, Wayne, and I would venture to say it's not just plots. It's all public land, and there's some reasons, there's some reasons for that, whether it's the urbanization of the population and they're losing contact with landowners, not developing relationships, whether it's harder to actually get on land than it used to be, but they're going to those public places when those things are happening. And so North Dakota, 94% private land, 6% of the land is getting a pretty hard hit in some cases. And honestly, we're not just hearing it in the Badlands anymore. 5-6 years ago, when this really became a hot topic and we started adding things to surveys and things like that, it was mostly the Badlands. But I've been in the Northeast a few times meeting with landowners up there about elk stuff, and you just ask them about deer season and they're like, oh, rifle season, there's nobody here anymore, but bow season is out of control, you know, and whether you want to, why that is or why it isn't, you know, and there's some of them say it's non-residents. Of course, it's the blue plate was parked there for too long. It was all non-residents, but some of them are saying it's residents too. It's not that simple. So, you know, just showing this, you know, how do you spread out pressure? You know, is it enough to spread out these folks that are on these numbers? Would that help? Would we notice it? You know, other things is that we forget is, you know, a lot of times we'll hear landowners, and especially Western landowners, like, too many people. And I don't necessarily think they're always talking about hunters, although hunters seem to get wrapped up in it a lot. But when you think about 20 years ago and what's happened out west, and the number of, whether it's campers, trail users, oil field, it's nonstop, you know. So whether it's hunters getting blamed more or less than they should, you know, it's up in the air. But we're going to look at some more data and dig deeper with this group that we've put together. And like I said, we don't just want to jump in because we are removing an opportunity for somebody. We want to make sure that if we make a change, that it's going to be useful and do what we think it might do. So we just wanted to touch on that a little, just let everybody know that that kind of work is going on. And like I said, these 3 guys that are on there, I know we're government, it's probably slower than we want to be, but we definitely want to do it right.
What kind of changes are you proposing, or are you guys thinking?
We're not proposing any right now, but one of the things was, when you just look at those numbers, the question comes up, what if we just held them to those units?
Right.
You know, would that make a difference or would it not? Would we actually put more people in 4C than we are? Maybe those 109 whatever licenses, maybe 20 of them are hunting in 4B and only 80 of them are hunting in 4C, and that's still too many. But you put them in a group, now all 109 are in 4C. You just don't, you know, you don't know what your repercussions, where those things are going to happen or where they're going to lay out. You know, I can guarantee that most of those 3B1 and 3B2 are not hunting in 3B1 and 3B2. Where exactly that is, you know, question, but yeah.
I think it was that 4C had 4 times the amount of bow hunters in that unit compared to any other unit in the state.
Yep.
2.2 times the number of bow hunters.
Yeah. Yeah, and you get number of bow hunters, and then you get into number of days used, and certain things. And so, like I said, when we get this 3rd year, you know, then we can really statistically say with confidence that this is happening out there and this is not. The other weird thing that happens too is, of course, the first 2 years of the survey were kind of the COVID bump years and things too. So we kind of want to get outside of that COVID bump year too, to kind of help look at things a little bit better.
I spent quite a bit, several weeks in 4D this year, right, 6 or 7 weeks, but most of the runners I've seen, or most of the bow hunters I've met, have been none but it was 4 from Oregon.
Yeah.
And then one that are picking Minnesota. But I'm sure you said it, but I wanted to clarify, if somebody draws a 4B, 100, one of the 142 out of 4B, they can hunt anywhere in the state.
Anywhere in the state, yep. It's just that they have an any deer license.
The allocation.
Like on the youth deer season,
Mm-hmm.
if the youth wants to shoot a mule deer, buck or doe, I think.
Yep.
For sure buck. They have to put down their unit and stay in there.
Right. Yep.
I don't see there any reason.
Yeah.
They're gonna wait till anywhere else.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, it's easy to pick non-residents. I'm not necessarily for or against them. You know, there's not really that many tags of them.
I'm not saying it's really, I mean,
right.
It is non-residents, but it's each unit is generating a specific number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That should be taken out.
Yeah. And you know, it honestly makes it more biological.
Yep.
That way, as far as our management system and allocations of tags per area.
I'm just saying that. With the youth.
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Now, the question is if we go that route and it doesn't fix it, what's next?
I won't start on that.
You know, so those are the things that us as a group are gonna wrestle with, before we come up with, you know, any type of ideas and things that we're really gonna roll out.
When's the last time the legislature revisited the non-resident allocation?
Good question.
Since they passed it?
Since they passed.
Do you remember, Terry?
A long time.
Okay, so, a long time ago.
A long time.
So
Terry's here, God dang it.
50% maximum?
15%, yeah. Just 15% is what it says in Century Code.
Of rifle tags.
Of the rifle tags.
The game fish department itself can say, you know, we only want to give out 5% of that.
No,
You can do that?
no, we have to give up 15% of the mule deer allocation in the state, yeah.
And a change would be a change in statute.
Yeah, and that would be a change in statute. The whitetail's over the counter for non-residents right now.
Unlimited.
Yep, it's unlimited. And so that's one other number on there. So down below, right, as I printed this last week, it was 2,300 non-resident whitetail tags that have been sold this year. Of course, we'll sell a few more, but with weather and stuff, maybe not a whole lot more. But last year we sold that 2,721, so we're down just a little. And we're also down just a little on our resident archers. That's over to the right there. We're at 23,000 as 600 as of printing, and last year we sold just over 26,000. So, you know, we'll sell a few more of those. If weather clears up, people can come home for Christmas or things like that, and it looks like it'll be enjoyable to hunt. We might sell a few more, but we probably won't hit that 26. I don't, you know, but it's still, you know, it's still a fairly good number, but yeah. Yeah.
What's the archery success ratio, and has it been increasing over the years?
It has been kind of a steady increase. We teeter between probably 35 and 40%.
For all species.
For all species, yeah. Yeah. And you know, we talk about non-residents and seeing them a long time. Of course, anybody that hunts out of state, you know, it's different than when I run out to the Badlands for a weekend because the weather looks nice and my boys want to go camping and we can go archery hunting at the same time. But when I draw a tag in Montana, my gosh, I take a week to 10 days off. That's a tag that I don't get very often, you know, or something like that. So you can imagine, you know, a guy who draws or a gal who draws one of these tags, it's not that they're just going to come out for 2 days. You know, that's a trip for them, even though we think of it as a weekend trip in some cases, you know.
I was shocked to see 4 guys from Oregon out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they got lucky and got drawn, so, yeah. And you know, how much of it happens where guy X gets drawn and his buddy can buy a whitetail tag and just go with him. And if he happens to run across a whitetail, he could be out there hunting whitetails, you know? And so a lot of things to tease out and a lot of information that group is going to be hammering out, but we want to get it right. Or at least give it the best chance we can to get it right. You look like you got a question.
I stopped the deer subject. Has there been any thought to, I know a lot of people don't like non-residents, but I don't mind non-resident spring turkey hunt, like archery or something. We have leftover tag, some units. It's kind of funny because the guys will ask me, and we're one of the very few states that doesn't let non-residents. We let them come in the fall and shoot them, which again, for me, I'm not quite sure about that one versus the spring. Can they help me on why we don't have the spring for non-residents, but we have fall, and they can get, I think they could get like 6 or 7 tags if they wanted to on the leftover.
Yeah. So in the spring you can get 2 tags total.
Right. But
in the fall you can get it's
a non-resident can't get spring turkey.
Right, and that is actually in Century Code.
Right.
Whether we want to change that or not.
Was there a reason for it? I mean,
I think, you know, right. Of course, when turkey season started, it was a lot harder to draw tags. Turkey have been successful in the state, you know. And so that was probably the basis of it, kind of like our pronghorn licenses, you know. The gun license is only good for, or now the pronghorn lottery license is only good for residents. And that's in Century Code, and that's because, usually we never have a problem with residents that want them, in some cases. And so those are both in Century Code. They would take legislative change, to bring that up. Not saying that we can or we shouldn't, but,
Is there any reason that the Game and Fish would not support like a non-resident limited turkey season? I mean, eggs or archery or?
I'll let Jim touch on that,
Well-
because he's the one that's gonna say yea or nay.
Again, I mean, it just gets back into the social issues of stuff. The department can distribute and issue tags to whomever, but, it gets into the social aspect of it, of basically coming down to if the supply and demand when it comes to resident hunters. I mean, and that's, certainly some of the reason behind that is that, the number of spring turkey licenses, we usually have most people, obviously there's not very many left over that are available out there. So the opportunity is usually filled by residents. I shouldn't say usually, it always is. And so that would be what you'd be potentially taking away. So.
But, and again, from what I'm seeing is that there are usually a few hundred spring turkey tags left over for where you can pick them up.
Yeah, to get the double,
one.
to get the second one.
Tags.
Yep. Yeah, but we don't ever have any that go unused.
Sit idle, right.
Right.
Oh, do we have deer tags that sit unused?
We haven't, no. So, I kind of put that back on everybody else, John, with that. I mean, again, it's probably not necessarily, wouldn't be an issue that the department would weigh heavily in on. It's more of a public issue as far as if people feel like that's reasonable to where a resident would potentially not have a spring turkey tag, but a resident might.
And again, that's the same with the deer tags we can look at, because non-residents take away deer tags.
Yep, 1%.
Not much,
And
yeah.
that's kind of, we all love to hunt.
Mhm.
I like to hunt other states. A lot of people like to hunt,
Yeah.
and we all live in the United States, so it's kind of nice to share it. Either way we look at it, everything we have, if we let non-residents on here, we generally take away opportunity for a resident, correct?
Yeah, most of the time, yeah.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, and biologically, obviously, we give out 100 tags, we give out 100 tags, that's not gonna be a biological issue for us at all. It's gonna be more of, who wants what as far as how those get to non-resident or resident,
Thank you.
Yeah. So a few other things I'll hit on quick. We talked about the pronghorn population. One other thing I wanted to hit on was our bighorn sheep population is doing really well. 335 total sheep in the state. And Brett can keep them off of Highway 85. Sometimes he lives out there for a couple weeks while they're hanging out by the Triple C campground.
Is that tunnel work?
Yeah, we've got pictures of bighorns going through it. There's cameras up there, yeah, so some of that stuff is successful. The trick is if one happens to get on the wrong side of that dang fence now, the fence is to keep them off the highway, but if they get on the wrong side, then you gotta try to get them to the jump out or something,
Got to cross the cattle guard.
Yeah, they got across the cattle guard because the specs weren't built right, but.
Is there a utilization rate for those tunnels? Because I've heard in like Wyoming that the overpasses are generally more successful. Do we have any metric to compare?
We don't, of course, we don't have any overpasses as of
Right.
now. But one of the things that is shown in bighorn sheep is it's a learned behavior. So as you get, lambs and stuff that their mother takes through, they'll go through more and more often. And so that's, we're hoping.
It's what we recommended to DOT was an overpass
Yeah.
for bighorn sheep, but
Yeah.
obviously that's a lot more, you're basically building a mountain.
Yeah.
Building a butte over a highway, and so
Yeah.
a lot more expensive, and we got what we got, and we were happy to get it, so.
Yeah, so on bighorn sheep, the 3 affiliated tribes transplant that we partnered with is doing exceptionally well, like higher lamb recruitment than any other population in the United States. We went from 30 sheep that we transplanted in 2020 to now we've got 75 in that herd. And so if things go as planned here and nothing weird happens with that population, we're slated to receive a tag for state hunters in 2026. And then 2 more tags after that in alternating years with the tribe. And then after that, the MOU will be reached. And the other thing in the MOU that we've talked about is if that population keeps growing, at some point, some of those sheep could be used for transplant into other areas potentially. And so, yeah, that one's been a really unique, good partnership. 3 affiliated tribes, Game and Fish up there, give them a shout out. They've been excellent to work with. Brett's been working with them to try to get them up to speed on bighorn sheep management, and stuff like that. But
Anything left for as far as south of Laura?
there's a few left down there, and we give out tags. The other thing we did is we added B5 this year. I don't know if anybody noticed that when they applied. We split B4, because what was happening is most people were hunting. We were giving out 2 licenses in B4 in a lot of cases, and they were both taking rams out of the herd west of 85. And nobody was going to the east side. And so we were getting some pretty old rams over there that Brett wanted to get harvest on and things like that. And so we split that unit to put somebody in B5 on that east side of the highway. And so that was a little change that we did this year, but more to distribute the harvest and things like that. So bighorn sheep, north of the interstate are doing really well. There's some pneumonia that's popping up every once in a while. That's kind of carryover lag that is out there, and our guys are looking at maybe if there's a way that we can help some of that. Some other states have done some things, and so we're looking into ways that maybe there's like the super spreader out there that just kind of carries it, and so we're looking into ways that maybe we can help that situation out. But they seem to be producing well, even the ones that had pneumonia. So they dealt with this strain fairly well compared to most strains of pneumonia in bighorn sheep. But I'll let fisheries take over their part now, so I don't take up the rest of the night.
All right, I'm going to change the flavor, the fish part of Game and Fish, and I'm just going to take a few minutes and give you a quick update. And obviously, everybody in this room must hunt, and I assume most everybody else fish. And if you fish in North Dakota, I'm speaking to the choir now, but you guys know we've been on a high. And about every metric we have to measure fishing success, from license sales to angler days to participation to catch, everything over the last 10 years, we've hit a record. Currently, we're at a record for the number of lakes in the state. Mother Nature's been very kind to us in the fishery. If you're an angler or a fishery biologist, they've been very kind to us since 1993. Everything changed. And I'm going to walk through this handout. This one of the colored graphs on the front page. I just want to explain to you guys, this is totally an upbeat thing here. It's been nothing but good news, but I want to kind of explain what's happened in the role of fish production, either our trap or transport or the hatcheries. And that's part of a big reason what we have today. That first series of 4 small graphs up there, they just show the fishing waters over 30 years. The fishing waters, the pike waters, the yellow perch waters, and our walleye waters, all of them have grown significantly to record highs again. And in the case of, just FY, in case of perch and pike, in North Dakota waters are meant generally for perch and pike. They do quite well if conditions are right. So it's, again, starting 93, 90, all the wet years, 97, it goes on and on. We get those years, we flood out vegetation in the spring, like 2022. We get a really good year class, and they kind of take care of themselves. We don't need to stock them anymore. We introduce them, we can walk away from a lot of the lakes. So North Dakota, most of our pike and perch lakes take care of themselves. That's not the case for walleye. Good, bad, or otherwise, that's just reality. Is again, we have 220 some lakes. We maybe have 20 lakes in the entire state that have fairly decent walleye reproduction. So for the most part, we need to stock them every year, or at least every other year. And that's what that shows there, the circle, and then the number of fish that we've stocked over time and the number of waters as they've grown over time. So it's just kind of like keep you guys up to speed on that. So in walleye in North Dakota, I'm sure most of you guys fit the bill I do. There's 3 species. These are the 3 species that North Dakota's like: pike, perch, and walleye. And by far, walleye is number 1. 82% of North Dakotans, that's number 1 fish species is walleye. So those are the 3 that we're after, or that we spend probably the better part of our time. But I don't want to forget, you go to page 2, that back page there. this is just a list, like this year's list of the other species. It's not just those 3 species. We deal with, there's probably a dozen species that we'll deal with every year, from catfish to trout, crappie, muskie, a little bit of everything, some panfish. In the case of, again, walleye or pike, when we do, for the most part, those fish are raised at the hatchery. We get the eggs, we raise them, and then we stock them. In the case of some of these, panfish, some of these specialized fisheries are trying to grow part of the R3 deal in fisheries. We're trying to bring the fish to the anglers. We have tons of opportunity, but a lot of them are 50 plus miles from Bismarck, for example, other than the Missouri River. We want more participation. We want more women. We want more kids. We want more opportunity for more people to get out and they don't have the means. They don't have $100,000 sparkly boats, right? They don't have them. Maybe they don't have deep pockets. So they got to go close to home, wherever home is. So we're trying to focus a lot of these community fisheries, and Paul right here has done a wonderful job. If you're from Bismarck, you know about Cottonwood Park Pond, South Bismarck, and the soccer and softball diamonds. That's a very popular deal there where we move fish in the spring of the year to these local community fisheries. So we do what we call trap and transport in the spring of the year, and we move a lot of adult fish because we can. It's easier that time of the year. They concentrate it, and it's very intense work. But we move them to all these, and they vary from Belfield to building one in Devil's Lake to Wapaton. Throughout the state, we have a lot of these we call community ponds for it. It's put and take, get out there and have at them. So that you spend a lot of time, and you'll see these bigger fish on that second page. That's what that's about. So, but the smaller fish, the bread and butter, what North Dakota's like, again, especially the walleye, we're stocking in the neighborhood of 12 million, upwards 12 million walleye fingerling. And I bring that up, and when I say fingerling, we're talking 1.5 to 2 inch fish. It's incredible. North Dakota is the only, I believe now, is the only state in the union that does not have a state fish hatchery. What we do have, thank God, are 2 federal hatcheries, Valley City and Garrison. And in particular, Garrison is incredible production because of great staff. They have very good staff there, but also because we have wonderful water, the water quality coming out of Garrison Dam in the ponds. And then we have 64 rearing ponds there. So that gives us the ability, without that, we'd be really in tough shape. That gives us the ability to produce all these fish. So we're stocking, again, in some years, upwards of 12 million walleye fingerling throughout the state. And give you a little bit of perspective. And this kind of leads into that back page, the third page here is our relationship or state-federal partnership with the Fish and Wildlife Service. But we're stocking more fish in North Dakota without a state hatchery than any other state or any other province throughout North America. So it's pretty incredible what we must be living, right? Because this all happened at the time when all the water came on. So we had we had a need, and we were able to meet that. We continue to meet the need. That relationship with the Fish and Wildlife Service, just to FYI, what we do is the state, Paul and many of our field crews, we go out, we take the eggs in the spring, the pike, the walleye, whatever it might be. We take the eggs, we take them to the hatchery people, and there's all 5 or 6 of them. There's not many of them anymore, but their staff raise the fish through jars. They take the jar, they hatch off this fry, they go out into the rearing ponds, they get about this big again, and then the state then stocks the fish in the lakes. So it's kind of a unique partnership. Nowhere else in North America is it done that way, but it's really, really worked well for everybody in this room. So, and we hope to continue. Now, the other thing I should mention with that, there's 71, 72 federal fish hatcheries in the union. None of them anymore really deal with recreational fish. They don't deal with walleye or pike or anything. So the only reason they do here is because we fund it. The state funds their operational costs. The Fish and Wildlife hatcheries have new missions. So over the last 30 years, they've evolved to endangered species and species of concern. That's what they deal with. So at the same time, Garrison, they have other walking orders, and their mission is a lot different than ours, but yet they still produce the pellet sturgeon recovery that's occurred throughout the entire Missouri River Basin is because of Garrison Dam hatchery, and what they've been able to do up there. So burbot, they deal with lake sturgeon at Valley City. So we can deal with all these other fish species at the same time. So it's really unique, and it's been no conflict, and it's been something that's, I think it's really benefited everybody. So we just wanted to share that with you guys, kind of give you an update on it. And then in the crystal ball, moving forward, people don't really care about yesterday, they care about tomorrow where the fish are ready. But it's still more good news. What happened last spring, that the snow and the rain and everything in April came at the perfect time in terms of filling up the lakes, because we were getting down again, it's North Dakota way, right, with our lakes. Where it was just in time that it looks like we had very good pike and really good perch reproduction, a lot of these smooths and stuff. So, write it down 3-4 years from now, hopefully we're gonna have another big boom in a lot of our perch fisheries throughout the state. So we're in good shape. We always could use a little more water, but we're doing probably an A to A+ right now. So just wanted to share that with you guys. Yes, sir.
How was the crappie hatch on Wahi?
Well, we didn't really have much of a Wahi, Paul.
No, on Lake Oahe, basically with these lower water levels are usually correlated with poor fish reproduction that year. And like Greg mentioned, our prairie lakes, we saw with that April blizzard and the rising water levels did really good things on most of our prairie lakes. Our Missouri River system, well, Lake Oahe especially, did not see great natural reproduction of really any fish species this year. We did see some walleye reproduction again, which if you've been fishing Lake Oahe, you can see all the little fish in there. We unfortunately didn't eat them, but we did get more walleye reproduced this year. But no, when we see good years of crappie reproduction, I don't know if you got to experience the great crappie fishing, say like 2015, 16, 17 on Lake Oahe, that really stemmed from Lake Oahe filling back up in 2009 after the 2001 through 2008 drought. That led to great conditions for crappie reproduction and survival of those crappie.
That's why you see them all the same size when you run into them, right?
Yep, I fished for some of those fish myself. Buddy and I went fishing there, kept 20 crappie one time and actually aged them, looking at their otoliths. And I think of the 20 fish we had, I think 17 of them were all from that 2009 year class. So we were really mining that 1 year class for years and years. Yep.
Well, you mentioned Wahi reproduction. Just goes at Sakakawea. We did have an unusual event with reproduction up there. Is that sauger? You know what walleye are? I think most people know what sauger are too, and we've really been on slide on sauger for years. But that flood event in Yellowstone River, we think that was the cause. I'm sure it was, but that flood event ended up having 2.5 times more young deer sauger than we've ever seen in history. So again, 3-4 years from now, you'll probably be seeing a lot more sauger in that fishery.
What about bait fish on Skakwe? I know
we're smelts a bait fish. That's the bread and butter.
I thought somebody in the last meeting earlier this year was saying how we were maybe running to the edge of
we still are.
Bait fish.
Yeah.
So that hasn't improved, even though.
Well, it hasn't improved, no, but we're still okay. I mean, if we didn't have that unexpected rise in Sakakawea, we could be hurting right now.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're kind of going into next spring in the same conditions.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
What's your plan for Audubon? I see you're putting a lot of muskie in there the last few years. Are you phasing out the walleye?
No. Oh, gosh, no. And actually, the last 2 years, we've stocked, and I think even next year on the stocking, because we've been a little bit light on our stocking. Audubon's a good example. You think, wow, that lake, beautiful gravel, substrate and stuff. That lake does not have natural reproduction. So it's dependent on stocking it. We were light on stocking it a few years back, the last couple of years. So you're probably going to start seeing a lot of small walleye again in the next year or two. But no, we've increased the walleye stocking a little bit there.
Bait fishing.
Well, yeah. I'm in perch. There's a lot of small perch still. One thing that really helped getting was walleye bigger for about 10 years there is we had a fair amount of cisco that came in through Sakakawea. And the cisco are just kind of aging out. We're not seeing reproduction of the cisco in there for many years, so that's a bit challenging. Okay? Thank you.
Yeah, one more. You don't get away quite yet, Greg.
Yes, in 5, 10, 20 years, is there anything that can peril that relationship with the hatcheries?
Yeah, you're talking 5, 10 years from now, we really, Terry's done on fishery. I mean, we've been through this rodeo. About 20 years ago, it was bad. Things were going the wrong direction quick because they changed their mission, right? These federal hatcheries they got all the sport fish business and they started to decommission, and they still are, some of them, but they started to put hatcheries on the hit list to close them down. We call it hatchery bashing. There's a lot of professional hatchery bashing that was going on 20, 30 years ago. So, and Valley City was on that list. And thankfully, congressionals at that time stepped up and really probably helped save that hatchery. But, you know, the last 10 years, it's been pretty quiet on the federal end, so that's good. It's good. Yes, sir.
We touched base on bull fishing a little bit, or no?
Sure.
Is there any other future plans on expanding our sport in North Dakota?
Are you the one with asking about pike?
Not pike and catfish.
Okay, you've seen your request. Sure, if you can. Yeah, the question is about bull fishing and expanding it to maybe pike. Right now, it's just rough fish. That's all you can do with archery. We're looking at it. I know for sure.
I know we've been trying to get our crowd people a little bit more under control than they used to be.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Point of reference, you go back 5 to 20 years ago, we had issues with the community. I mean, there was a lot of bad things. We had a lot of complaints from homeowners, landowners, anglers about wanton waste, right? Just sticking fish and laying them on shore. So I tell you what you guys have done, this is a attaboy here, but since the flood of 2011, that was bad right after that. But the last 10 years, that group, your group, I mean, they're outstanding job of cleaning up your acts, so to speak. But I mean, working with the dump
and stuff like that really helped out. They take it, they use it as compost.
Exactly.
They put it in their, they don't charge us for it. Before we'd struggle finding
place to put them.
take it and stuff like that. But
no, we've had no complaints for almost 10 years. So I mean, that really helps.
I know, like I said, I don't want to go like beyond crazy of asking about things. South Dakota, you can shoot all legal game. We're not even asking anything like that. But the majority of the fish that we actually see when we're out on the Missouri system from South Dakota to Montana is we see northerns, catfish, and bass. And that's all we see, the majority of it. I mean, yeah, we see, all the other rough fish species, but the majority of the fish we're seeing are northerns and catfish right now. That's what I see.
And just a FYI, bull fishing is a growing industry.
It is.
I mean, we're up, it was 4 years ago, 2018, 3% of the licensees bullfish. I mean, it used to be 0.3%. So it's definitely growing. There's interest in it. But yeah, the question was about allowing pike, at least in the Missouri River system. It's something we look at. If we go there, this meeting a year from now, this is where we'll be talking about it. You know, we bring all our recommendations in.
And when I said that, how South Dakota did it is they allowed the game fish species only during daylight hours because we have a hell of an advantage over them at nighttime, right? During the daylight hours, it's just like any other game going after them, right? We can still see them, but it's not like it is at nighttime. And that's how they got it in the door, was to do it during the daylight hours. And like I said, to put an actual limit on it. And like I said, I don't know if you guys have anything against catfish or not, but most of the states that opened it up, they opened it up mainly for northerns and catfish. And, self-imposed, they have limits on it. We can go to Montana, we bullfish for paddlefish up there.
Right.
So we get paddlefish tags in Montana, we shoot. We get paddlefish tags in South Dakota, we go down to Yankton. I said, I don't even. I don't want to go there.
I was gonna say, I don't.
They're very officers or states. But the biggest thing was just if we could further it or even look into it down the road.
Right.
Like I said, we're trying to expand it, but we're also trying to make it better than it was in the past. There's always bad things.
You've done a good job cleaning it up.
You need a separate license to bullfish?
No.
Some states actually, only have a bow fishing only tag.
Yep.
So, do I go fishing? Maybe. Some years I don't. I go bow fishing. But it'd be nice to be something home, even if it's a northern at the end of the day. I mean,
And so, you know, dark called spearfishing, most states, if they allow it, that's a separate license in itself too. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. One more thing I want to add on fisheries here. So just a couple days ago, I received a letter from the state of South Dakota, and again, a kind of kudos to our fisheries folks. But so in the fall, obviously, when salmon eggs are collected, Lake Sakakawea, and we've received our quota, and then the partnership with South Dakota, where they actually then collect eggs as well and take back down to South Dakota for their hatchery. And so very appreciative of that. So when you guys are down fishing in South Dakota catching their salmon, just make sure you remember where they came from. So, but, you know, again, a great partnership. Obviously, there's some give and take there, but, you know, it's also one of those things that, you know, from our staff, as well, as far as after they've gone through all that effort collecting what we need as a state, you know, then they're also helping out, you know, South Dakota. And so I just received a really nice letter from South Dakota about that partnership. And so that's always something that's important to us. So we've got an action-packed 2 hours. And so one of the things we need to do here is we've got 3 door prizes, and we have a bighorn sheep tag, an elk tag, and a moose tag. We forgot to print them out. That's great. So we got 3 other prizes that we're gonna slip in here, but I do want. I'll sleep here. But we will, we're gonna be here after it, but again, you guys have been really generous with your time here for a good couple hours, and so, Jody, I'm gonna ask you, we've got, anywhere from number 1 to 49. So I need 3 numbers.
3, 22, 38.
Number 3, Travis Jensen.
Hey, multi-tool or?
Sorry, Joey. 22.
38.
Who's it?
You're gonna help me out here on this one, Bill.
What number are we on?
22.
Jay. Got it?
Goda? There you go. And the last one?
38.
38. John Rich, you won't even have to make a decision on what you're gonna get. You're gonna get a bag, John. Like I said, thanks everybody for taking the opportunity to come out. We're gonna stick around here. There's some coffee and cookies left over. Feel free to do the same. Everybody have a great holiday season. Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you.